The assumption that mental sharpness must inevitably decline with the passing of years is perhaps the most pervasive and damaging myth surrounding the aging process. Society often reinforces a narrative of depletion, suggesting that the brain is a static vessel that slowly leaks vitality once a person crosses the threshold of 70. This collective expectation creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where minor lapses are interpreted as catastrophic failures rather than ordinary human moments. However, a shift in perspective reveals that the mind remains an infinitely expandable instrument, capable of forging new connections and retaining vast amounts of information regardless of chronological age. By realigning the internal dialogue and understanding the profound link between intention and biology, an individual can unlock a reservoir of cognitive power that has been dormant. This exploration traces the mechanisms of belief, the physiology of attention, and the spiritual alignment necessary to maintain a robust, reliable memory well into the later decades of life. The power of intention and self-concept, the foundation of a reliable memory, lies not merely in cognitive drills, but in the fundamental way an individual perceives their own existence and capabilities. Wayne Dyer often emphasized that the words used to describe the self become the reality that the self experiences. When a person over 70 repeatedly affirms that their memory is failing or that they're having a senior moment, they are instructing their subconscious mind to manifest that limitation. This psychological mechanism operates through the reticular activating system in the brain, a filter that sorts millions of bits of data to present the conscious mind with evidence that matches its internal beliefs. If the belief is one of decline, the brain will diligently highlight every forgotten name or misplaced item while ignoring the thousands of successful memory retrievals that occur daily. Changing this internal designation from one of decline to one of expansion is the critical first step in revitalizing mental faculties. The biology of belief plays a measurable role in how neurons connect and communicate within the hippocampus, the region of the brain central to memory formation. Neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, is not the exclusive domain of the young. It is a lifelong capacity that responds directly to the demands placed upon it and the emotional state of the learner. When a person approaches a new piece of information with a confident expectation that they will remember it, the brain releases neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine, which strengthen the synaptic encoding of that memory. Conversely, approaching a task with anxiety or the anticipation of failure triggers the release of cortisol, a stress hormone that actively inhibits the function of the hippocampus. The individual who operates from a place of calm assurance is therefore creating a chemical environment that is optimized for retention and recall. A common scenario illustrates the divergence between these two mindsets in a practical setting. Consider an individual attending a social gathering where they are introduced to several new people in rapid succession. The person operating under the narrative of age-related decline might instantly tense up, thinking that there is no hope of remembering these names, and thus their brain disengages from the task of encoding before the introductions are even finished. In contrast, the person who views their mind as a reliable and expansive tool remains present in the moment, listening with the intent to connect rather than the fear of forgetting. They might employ a simple association or visualize the name written on the person's forehead, trusting that the information will be there when needed. This lack of performance anxiety allows the natural memory processes to work without the interference of self-doubt. There are, of course, limitations to this approach that must be acknowledged to maintain a balanced perspective. It is undeniable that processing speed can slow slightly with age, and that fatigue or health issues can impact cognitive performance temporarily. Asserting a positive self-concept does not magically cure underlying medical conditions or organic damage to the brain. However, the vast majority of memory complaints in healthy older adults are rooted in distraction, lack of presence, and the crushing weight of negative expectation rather than irreversible pathology. The objective is not to achieve the lightning-fast recall of a computer, but to cultivate a reliable, working memory that serves the individual's life and purpose. Acknowledging that the brain changes is different from accepting that it must fail. The subtle energy of how one speaks about the past also influences the ability to recall it. Dwelling on the idea that the best years are behind creates an energetic detachment from the present moment, which is the only place where new memories can be formed. Memory is essentially the residue of attention, and if attention is constantly pulled backward into nostalgia or regret, there is little mental bandwidth left to encode the now. By shifting the focus to the current experience and viewing the present as the most vital time of life, the individual signals to their brain that what is happening today is worth recording. This vitality of spirit acts as a preservation signal to the neural networks involved in recording daily events. It is also essential to consider the role of purpose in maintaining cognitive structural integrity. The brain is an efficiency machine that prunes away connections that are deemed unnecessary for survival or success. If a person retires from their career and simultaneously retires from the active pursuit of meaning, the brain receives a signal to conserve energy by powering down complex cognitive operations. Engaging in activities that feel significant, whether they involve service to others, creative expression, or the mastery of new skills, keeps the neural pathways vibrant. The expectation of future utility for the information being learned is a potent signal for retention. Furthermore, the physical environment and the sensory inputs one allows into their sphere affect memory clarity. A cluttered space often reflects and creates a cluttered mind, making it difficult to focus on the task at hand. Simplifying one's surroundings can lead to a surprising increase in mental clarity and memory function. When there are fewer distractions competing for attention, the brain can dedicate more resources to the encoding process. This clearing of the external erroneous zones mirrors the clearing of internal erroneous zones, creating a harmony between the inner and outer worlds that supports high-level cognitive function. The process of redefining oneself as a learner rather than an ager requires vigilance and patience. It involves catching the automatic negative thoughts that arise when a mistake is made and gently correcting them without judgment. Instead of saying, "My memory is terrible," the revised statement becomes, "I simply wasn't paying attention in that moment, but my memory is excellent when I am present." This consistent reframing slowly rewires the neural pathways, moving the baseline of the brain from a state of defensive preservation to one of active engagement. The individual begins to trust themselves again, and this trust is the lubricant that allows the machinery of memory to operate smoothly. Ultimately, the strength of one's memory is deeply intertwined with the level of peace one maintains. A mind that is at war with the reality of aging, or that is filled with worry about the future, has little capacity for the quiet work of remembering. Cultivating a practice of inner silence and acceptance clears the static from the mental airwaves. When the noise of anxiety subsides, the natural clarity of the mind emerges. It is often found that when an individual stops trying so hard to force a memory and instead relaxes into the knowledge that the information is there, it surfaces effortlessly. This surrender is not giving up. It is a strategic alignment with the flow of universal intelligence that runs through all life. What label am I willing to remove from my identity today? The biology of presence and attention, the mechanics of memory, are often misunderstood as a storage problem when, in reality, they're almost exclusively an attention problem. For a memory to be formed, the brain must first attend to the stimulus with sufficient intensity to move it from sensory memory into short-term and then long-term storage. In a world defined by constant distraction and multitasking, this initial step of attention is frequently skipped. For the individual over 70, the problem is often compounded by the habit of living in the head rather than in the moment. When a person is mentally rehearsing their schedule or worrying about a health concern while placing their glasses on the table, the brain never actually registers the location of the glasses. The memory of where the glasses were put was never lost because it was never formed in the first place. Physiologically, The act of paying attention involves the activation of the prefrontal cortex, the executive center of the brain responsible for focus and decision-making. As people age, this area can become less efficient if it is not regularly challenged. However, the brain retains a remarkable ability to strengthen these circuits through practice. Mindfulness, the act of paying deliberate, non-judgmental attention to the present moment, is not just a spiritual concept, but a rigorous cognitive training tool. By training the mind to return to the immediate sensory experience, the texture of the object in hand, the sound of the voice speaking, the visual details of the environment, the individual strengthens the neural integrity of the prefrontal cortex. This increased vascularization and synaptic density in the attention centers of the brain directly correlates with improved memory performance. The connection between stress hormones and memory failures cannot be overstated. Chronic low-level stress, which often accompanies the navigation of health issues or life transitions in later years, elevates cortisol levels. Prolonged exposure to high cortisol is toxic to the hippocampus, actually shrinking this vital brain structure over time. Therefore, the cultivation of a calm and centered demeanor is not merely a mood preference, but a neuroprotective strategy. Techniques that lower the stress response, such as deep rhythmic breathing or meditation, have been shown to halt and even reverse the atrophy of the hippocampus. By consciously choosing a state of peace, the individual is physically rebuilding the hardware necessary for a robust memory. A practical application of this principle can be seen in the way one manages daily routines. Consider the act of parking a car in a large lot. A distracted driver might park while talking on the phone or thinking about their shopping list, only to find themselves wandering aimlessly later. The conscious driver, applying the principles of presence, takes a brief moment after turning off the engine to look around, note a landmark, and perhaps say aloud, "I'm parked in row 4 near the light post." This deliberate pause takes only seconds, but engages multiple sensory channels: visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, creating a robust memory trace. It is an act of respecting the mind enough to give it the data it needs to function. It is important to address the counterargument that some memory decline is organic and unrelated to attention. Conditions such as dementia or Alzheimer's disease involve pathological changes that cannot be fully mitigated by mindfulness alone. However, even in the early stages of cognitive decline, the reduction of anxiety and the improvement of attentional focus can significantly enhance quality of life and functional independence. Distinguishing between a brain disease and a brain that is simply untrained or distracted is crucial. For the vast majority of the population, the deficits experienced are functional rather than structural, meaning they are amenable to change through the alteration of habit and mindset. The concept of monotasking becomes a powerful ally in this pursuit. The modern glorification of multitasking is detrimental to the aging brain, which requires a slightly longer switching time between cognitive tasks. By committing to doing one thing at a time, eating without reading, walking without planning, listening without rehearsing a response, the individual allows the brain to process information deeply. Deep processing is the key to retrieval. Information that is skimmed on the surface of the mind washes away quickly, but information that is held in the light of full attention sinks deep into the neural architecture, where it can be retrieved days or years later. Diet and physical movement also play supporting roles in the biology of presence. A brain fueled by highly processed foods or prone to blood sugar spikes will struggle to maintain a steady focus required for memory formation. Similarly, a sedentary lifestyle reduces the flow of oxygen-rich blood to the brain. Moderate physical activity has been shown to immediately boost levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, a protein that acts like fertilizer for neurons, promoting their growth and survival. The individual who walks daily and eats foods that nourish the nervous system is building a physiological platform that supports the high-level psychological work of staying present. The integration of Wayne Dyer's philosophy suggests that this presence is also a connection to the source of all being. When one is fully in the now, They're aligned with the universal intelligence that orchestrates the functioning of the entire body. This alignment reduces the friction of the ego, which is often the source of the distracting chatter that interferes with memory. The ego is obsessed with past and future. The spirit is content in now. By shifting identification from the ego mind to the observing spirit, the pressure to perform dissolves, and, ironically, performance improves. The memory works best when it is not being strangled by the fear of failure. Sleep architecture changes with age, and this too impacts the biology of memory. Deep sleep and REM sleep are the periods during which the brain consolidates memories, moving them from temporary to permanent storage. Prioritizing sleep hygiene and valuing rest as a productive activity is essential. The cultural narrative that older adults need less sleep is often a misunderstanding of fragmented sleep patterns. The need for restorative sleep remains high. By creating a sanctuary for sleep and viewing it as a sacred time for mental archiving, the individual supports the biological processes that secure the memories of the day. Ultimately, the mastery of attention is a form of self-love. It is a declaration that the present moment is worthy of being experienced fully and that one's own life is worth remembering. When an individual stops rushing through their days and starts inhabiting them completely, the memory naturally sharpens. The blur of autopiloting through life is replaced by the vivid high-definition experience of conscious living. In this state of heightened awareness, the memory becomes a faithful servant rather than an unruly master. When did I last rush through a moment I wanted to keep? Eliminating the anxiety of forgetting the emotional reaction to a memory lapse is often far more damaging than the lapse itself. A pervasive anxiety surrounds the act of forgetting for those over 70, where every misplaced name is scrutinized as a harbinger of decline. This anxiety creates a heightened state of arousal that floods the brain with noise, making it nearly impossible to retrieve the information that is actually there. It is a paradoxical loop. The fear of forgetting causes the brain to freeze, which leads to forgetting, which validates the fear. Breaking this cycle requires a radical shift in how memory failures are interpreted and a refusal to attach shame to the natural ebb and flow of cognitive function. The mechanism at play involves the interplay between the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and the prefrontal cortex. When the amygdala detects a threat, in this case, the social threat of embarrassment or the existential threat of aging, it hijacks the brain's resources, diverting energy away from the higher-order thinking centers. This amygdala hijack effectively shuts down the retrieval pathways. The information is often just below the surface, but the stress response builds a wall between the conscious mind and the data. By learning to downgrade the threat level of a memory lapse, the individual keeps the pathways open. A helpful approach is to adopt a stance of playful curiosity rather than self-condemnation when a memory remains elusive. Instead of tensing up and engaging in negative self-talk, one might say, it has momentarily stepped out of the room, but will be back shortly. This release of tension signals safety to the brain. It is a common experience that the forgotten name pops into the mind 20 minutes later while one is washing dishes or taking a walk. This occurs because the pressure was removed, the cortisol levels dropped, and the brain was able to access the file in the background. Trusting this background processing is a skill that must be cultivated. There are scenarios where the anxiety is externally driven, such as in medical appointments or high-stakes financial discussions. In these moments, the pressure to recall details accurately can be overwhelming. A practical strategy is to externalize the memory function without judgment. Using a notebook, a voice recorder, or asking for information to be written down is not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. It frees the mind from the task of holding on to data, allowing it to focus on understanding the concepts and making decisions. The individual who uses tools to support their memory is not succumbing to age, but mastering their environment. It is important to recognize that the standard for memory often applied to older adults is unrealistically high. Young people forget keys, miss appointments, and blank on names constantly, yet these incidents are attributed to being busy or tired. When the same incidents occur in later years, they are pathologized. Recognizing this double standard helps to alleviate the heavy burden of perfectionism. The goal is not to have a flawless record of every second of the day, but to maintain a functional and happy life. Liberating oneself from the need to impress others with mental acrobatics frees up a tremendous amount of energy that can be used for living. The concept of selective forgetting is also worth exploring as a positive adaptation. The brain is designed to forget irrelevant information to prevent overload. As one accumulates decades of experiences, the database is vast. Prioritizing what is worth remembering and what can be let go is a sign of cognitive efficiency, not failure. Letting go of old grievances, trivial facts, and negative news cycles clears space for new, vital information. This conscious curating of the mind's contents aligns with the spiritual principle of non-attachment. Holding onto everything creates stagnation. Letting flow creates vitality. Social isolation can exacerbate the anxiety of forgetting. When an individual withdraws from social interaction to avoid the potential embarrassment of repeating a story or forgetting a word, they deprive their brain of its most potent stimulant, other people. Conversation requires complex processing, rapid-fire retrieval, and emotional attunement. It is the ultimate brain gym. The risk of a minor social fumble is far outweighed by the neurological benefits of engagement. True friends and loved ones are generally far more forgiving than the harsh inner critic. Reframing the narrative involves laughing at the glitches. Humor is a powerful antidote to cortisol. When a person can chuckle at a memory slip rather than spiraling into despair, they instantly change their brain chemistry. This lightness of being creates a hospitable environment for memory. It shifts the internal state from defense to connection. Wayne Dyer often spoke of the importance of not taking oneself too seriously. In the context of memory, this means accepting that the human machine has quirks and that these quirks do not diminish the value of the soul inhabiting it. Ultimately, the elimination of anxiety comes from a deep knowing that one is more than their memory. The essence of the person, their kindness, their wisdom, their capacity for love, remains intact even if a date or a name is temporarily misplaced. Anchoring one's identity in these eternal qualities provides a stability that the fluctuating nature of memory cannot shake. When the fear is removed, the mind relaxes, and in that relaxation, the natural brilliance of the intellect can shine through. The memory is strong, reliable, and easier to build when it is not being constantly interrogated by fear. What fear am I protecting by trying to be perfect? Integrating purpose for ageless cognition, the culmination of building a strong, reliable memory lies in the integration of a deep, driving purpose that demands the mind stay sharp. The brain is an energy-conserving organ. It will not expend resources on maintaining complex neural networks if it perceives that they are not needed. When an individual possesses a burning desire to contribute, to create, or to learn, the brain receives a compelling command to upgrade its hardware. This goes beyond crossword puzzles or brain games. It is about engaging with life in a way that matters. The spiritual view suggests that vitality flows where intention goes. If the intention is to serve and to grow, the cognitive faculties will rally to support that mission. The mechanism of purpose-driven neuroplasticity is robust. Engagement in high-challenge activities that are personally meaningful stimulates the release of neuromodulators that facilitate rapid learning and retention. A person over 70 who decides to learn a new language to connect with their heritage, or who takes up a complex musical instrument to express their emotions, is engaging the brain's plasticity machinery more effectively than someone passively consuming entertainment. The difficulty of the task is the signal to the brain that it must adapt. Comfort is the enemy of cognitive growth. Challenge is its catalyst. In a practical sense, this means structuring the day around activities that require mental stretch. It might involve volunteering in a role that requires organizing logistics, mentoring younger generations, which requires synthesizing wisdom, or engaging in creative writing, which demands vocabulary retrieval and structural planning. These are not just hobbies, they are cognitive preservation strategies. The applied scenario here is the individual who wakes up with a clear why. This why acts as a navigational beacon for the reticular activating system, focusing attention and resources on the information relevant to that purpose. There is a counterexample to consider: the busyness trap. Filling the calendar with trivial activities just to stay active does not provide the same benefit as deep, purposeful engagement. Activity without meaning can lead to burnout and cognitive fragmentation. The key is depth and emotional resonance. The brain remembers what the heart cares about. Therefore, the most effective memory strategy is to align one's daily pursuits with what one truly loves. Passion is a glue that binds memory. The spiritual perspective offered by thinkers like Dyer reminds us that we are not our physical bodies, nor are we our past behaviors. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. As such, the potential for growth is not limited by the biological age of the casing. By connecting to the infinite intelligence that animates all life, one taps into a source of energy that rejuvenates the mind. Meditation and spiritual practice are not escape from the world, but methods of tuning the instrument of the mind to a higher frequency of operation. A mind that is calm, connected, and purposeful is naturally efficient. The synthesis of these principles, shifting self-concept, mastering attention, eliminating anxiety, and living with purpose, creates a comprehensive framework for cognitive longevity. It moves the conversation from a medical model of inevitable decay to a holistic model of continuous potential. The promise is not that one will never forget a key again, but that the mind will remain a vibrant, expansive, and reliable tool for navigating the adventure of life. The limitations that were once thought to be solid walls are revealed to be smoke, easily dispersed by the winds of intention and belief. The journey of the ageless mind is an inward one. It requires the courage to challenge societal conditioning and the discipline to monitor one's own thoughts. It asks for a commitment to the present moment and a gentleness towards oneself. But the reward is a life lived with clarity and confidence, where the accumulation of years is seen not as a burden, but as a gathering of wisdom. The memory is not a leaky bucket. It is a vast library, and a librarian is still very much in charge. By taking command of the internal environment, the external reality shifts, and the golden years become a time of unprecedented mental clarity and spiritual depth. Where does my soul want to go that my mind needs to support?